It seems like everyone except parents want to teach or indoctrinate our children about their views and beliefs about sexual health and morals. Many claim to be science-based, but are they? Or are many of them just wolves in sheep's clothing? We'll find out today on this edition of Ask Dr. Walt.
Today, our health includes our mind, our body, and our spirit. Separating medical facts from fiction is the key that leads to wise decisions about our health and well-being. Unpacking the latest research is vital. Doing what works helps us live our best lives today. How can we live longer? How can we live healthier? Let's ask Dr. Walt on Liftable TV.
Hi, everyone. I'm family physician Dr. Walt Larimore. Thanks for joining me for what I hope will be a very insightful program. But due to the sensitive nature of this program, you might not want to watch it with younger children. And I want to reintroduce to you to Lori Kirkendall. She's a Master of Public Health who's been with us before and who is President and CEO of Medical Institute of Sexual Health. Lori, welcome back to Ask Dr. Walt.
Thank you, Dr. Walt. I'm so glad to be here. These are important topics, and I know your listeners will enjoy our conversation and hopefully get some practical guidance and support and encouragement, really. We need a lot of encouragement.
I bet we've got parents with sweaty palms, even thinking, they always think about the talk. And as we talked about last time, what we're trying to do is build character, values, and a healthy science-based view of sex that will serve them and our families for all of our lives. And that brings us to the Medical Institute for Sexual Health. So for those who didn't catch us last time, what is Medical Institute for Sexual Health?
So Medical Institute for Sexual Health, or MI, or Medical Institute, however you want to shorten it up, is a nonprofit, science-based public health research and education organization. So that's kind of a lot, but we are science-based in our approach, and we are public health. We are about advocating for physical and mental and relational and spiritual health, as Dr. Walt is as well. And then we're absolutely a research and resources, prevention and education, putting out that good science to the community and to parents and policymakers, educators, those who can support young people in making the healthiest decisions for both their current and their future health.
There's been a huge controversy in the sexual education world. There are those who kind of tout and push what's called comprehensive sex education. What is that, and should we be concerned about it?
Comprehensive sounds like a good thing, doesn't it, Dr. Walt? And it's a good word because it means whole and complete and everything there. But unfortunately, in the sex education world, comprehensive sex education is typically based on sexual rights and reproductive rights and sexual health. There's kind of these buzzwords around an approach that's very different than yours and mine. It's an approach that says to young people, first of all, they're all sexual from birth. They're going to be sexual. The best we can do is help them to consent and use contraception. Consent meaning give permission, a yes and going forward. And contraception, protected, safe sex, you're good to go. But you and I know that sex is not just about bodies and physical health, but that there are emotional and mental and relational and spiritual aspects to our sexuality that make, rather than encouraging kids to become sexually active, we uphold a standard of avoiding non-marital sexual activity or saving the good gift of sex for marriage, a lifelong commitment, covenant commitment with one person for life, and one man and one woman for life is not just a spiritual decision, it is a physical, a public health, science-based decision as well. So that's what we're about.
I'm sort of smiling thinking about this because it reminds me of, I'm old enough to have watched Saturday Night Live, and they always had the church woman, it was kind of a prude and in the black and telling people what they should do and what they shouldn't do. And so many of the couples that Barb and I counsel, we direct a marriage ministry at our church. We do premarital work as well as help people improve their marriages. But so many of our young couples have come to believe that they need to find out if they're sexually compatible or why save this, this gift? And when I share with them the science showing that people who choose to make that decision to have sex with one other person, their husband or wife, for a lifetime, have more enjoyable sex. They have more frequent sex their entire life, from when they're young to when they're old. And I love when I speak in front of schools, I tell the kids, do you want to have the best sex ever? Now, the kids are all excited about that. Their parents are getting really concerned. What's he talking about, the best sex ever? I said, if you want the best sex ever, the science could not be more clear. Wait until it's the right time when it's designed, and that's in a trusting relationship. We just had a couple we met with 3 nights ago. First time we met with them, and they were actually wrestling with, well, shouldn't we go ahead and have sex? And I said, if you were having sex, now they're going to get married next year. If you were having sex, we would tell you to stop right now. And in fact, if you don't, we won't continue premarital counseling. And they both went, well, why? And Barb looked at the lady and she said, do you want a man who can't say no? If he can't say no now, is he not going to say no later? And to him, I say, don't you want a wife, a spouse who trusts you? You can build that trust now to enter into what will be a fantastic marriage. That's just, I sort of ran through a bunny trail there, but the bottom line is that this all kind of came out of that free sex movement, didn't it, Lori? Back in the 60s and 70s, it said sex is just like shaking hands. You can do it all you want, and it's good, and it won't harm you. But in fact, the science shows that's not true.
Well, I'm glad that you went back to the sexual revolution of 50 years ago, because there was just a number of societal, cultural ills, we call them, or issues, challenges, problems, concerns around this topic that kind of fuel out of sex outside of that plan of preserving for the covenant commitment of a marriage relationship. So with that comes sexually transmitted diseases. There were only 2 back then. Now there are over 30, for example. We see the divorce rate, although it's taking an interesting turn, but with marriage also falling, there's some complications about divorce and marriage rate, but certainly divorce rates increase for those that were married along the way. And we see changes quickly around abuse, sex trafficking, pornography, abortion, you name all of those things. They're all sort of come under that sex outside of that good plan, the optimal health plan of preserving sex for the covenant of committed relationship with a lifelong partner. So from there, fundamentally in sex education, there's 2 different approaches. And you'll bump into this a lot in a school setting where they're debating what should be taught, by whom should it be taught. And a lot of that wants to marginalize parents and their role, wants to marginalize the value of sex, not just as a physical act, but emotional and mental and relational and spiritual bonding that it provides. And then they want to minimize what happens outside of that plan. So you really want to watch messaging and make sure you're getting a strong message based on science and public health, both current and future health of kids.
Well, that brings us to something I'm really excited about. We introduced our audience to it last time, but we're going to get a little bit more into it today. It's the Medical Institute's K-12 Standards for Optimal Sexual Development. Now, Dr. Walt recommends this. The medical citations are pages from the scientific literature, the number of doctors around the country that endorse it. It just goes on for pages. But I see this as help and hope for parents, not only with your families, it might be with the kids' nursery school, at your faith community. It might be in your school system. And Lori, I think I told you last time, I was part of the Surgeon General's Commission on Sexual Health. There were 30 commissioners chosen for that commission. Most of them, I think 26 of the 30, were into the comprehensive sex ed thing. And I wasn't sure we were going to ever find anything we could agree on. But what we ended up concluding was that sexual education, the education of values and responsibility and trust and health when it comes to physical health and emotional health and relational health and spiritual health, must start whenever possible at home. And this is a curriculum that can kind of guide and help parents, right?
Yes, this is standards, and standards are slightly different than curriculum. So standards is what to teach, often set at a state level. but they fuel curriculum decisions often at a local level. So these standards are very robust content of what children and young adolescents growing on up into the high school years should be taught around physical and mental and emotional and social, spiritual. I think you say it a little bit differently, Dr. Walt, but we're saying the same thing about a whole person approach to this topic. And the science is unquestionable. I mean, there is no debate when you really look at what's best for kids. And I think those of us who support this idea and really the standard of waiting for marriage and all that entails, and healthy relationships, friendships, dating, preparing for marriage and parenthood, those of us that support this have to feel confident in that message. And that's really what this tool is intended to do. Give confidence to parents, because in our culture today, we're sort of marginalized. This is a faith-based message, or maybe it's discounted as being fear-based or shame-based, or I've been called a bigot. I've been called judgmental. I've been called all kinds of negative things about what we're hoping for, which is really the best for every child. It's a very compassionate approach. And a hopeful approach for our next generation.
Well, it is whole health, every part of who we are, and beginning to teach that and model that for our kids. So if parents get this and they read it and they say, this is really good, I want my kids to have positive character values, I want them to make wise decisions when it comes to morals, can they use these standards to judge various curriculums as to what's healthful for their children and what's not?
Absolutely. That's exactly what they would do, would be set the standard. That's why we call them standards of what should be included in a comprehensive, to use that word really, approach to sex education, sexuality education that begins in the young years. You know, one of my favorite things about those standards is they uphold the dignity and value, the inherent worth of every person. That seems to be something that gets lost in the debate, specifically around gender identity topics, for example. And yet, to bolster children's understanding of who they are as a unique, valuable individual who should be respected and loved and valued is a whole message that sometimes gets lost in the debate. We want to strengthen children's ability to accept who they are, grow fully into who they were made to be, and find freedom there and fullness to pursue those healthy decisions.
Their sexuality is part of all of who they are, and it was created by their creator, who, I tell kids, it's not that he gives us boundaries because he doesn't want us to have fun. He gives us rules so that we can have the most fun, the most wholesome and healthful life. And so I can imagine a mom and a dad, or if we have a single parent, and quick bunny trail, I think single parenting may be the hardest job in the world, and we'll be doing programs in the future to encourage single parents. But for parents to sit down and look at these standards and talk about them themselves, I agree with that one. I like that one. I think that was important. How do we model this? How do we talk about this? And you go basically grade by grade almost. I mean, it's a roadmap to help parents with what's been really difficult for a lot of them in the past.
Absolutely. We need to help parents talk and keep on talking. Being a parent in today's world is hard. I like to say it is not a job for sissies. It is hard every day, and we want to give a tool, a very practical tool, as you said, a roadmap for how to talk about these topics. Do that when you're in the car on the way to school. Do that when you're at the ice cream shop on the Saturday afternoon. Talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And then listen and listen and listen to that truly relationship connection with your children, which is the most protective thing you can do, is keep the relationship open and trusting and loving between you all, specifically during the tumultuous years of puberty and adolescence. They need you now more than ever. You can do this and you must do this.
Well, yeah, and we talked last time about the numbers of studies that show that parents, the more time they spend with their children, the better that their children do. I tell parents in my practice that there is no such thing as quality time without quantity time. You can't schedule quality time. You can't make it happen in 10 minutes. It's spending quantity, it's those walks, those talks, those dinners, having dinner together. And for Barb and I was just talking to Kate and Scott, saying, how did it go? What was good? What was bad? What made you sad? Where did you feel success or see fruit? How about relationships? How about decisions? And Kate, who had cerebral palsy, so she has kind of had a stroke in the womb before she was born, so she has no right brain, half a left brain. And so for Kate, it was dealing with bullying and people calling her a retard and a spaz. And to be able to cry with her over that and to be able to love her through that and to be able to begin to equip her to, not just her, but her friends, to fight back against that. In fact, her best friend was Tina, and Tina's daddy taught driver's ed. So you couldn't get and drive a car without Tina's daddy giving you approval. So Tina was a big deal. So they were sitting in the cafeteria one day and three guys came and sat across from Kate and they started calling her a retard and a spaz. And Tina's mom and dad and Barb and I had really worked to equip our kids to deal with bullying. And the way Tina did it, she just stood up and left. She didn't tell Kate where she was going, which really kind of worried Kate. But she went over to the football table where the football linemen were sitting. She whispered something to them, and 6 of those linemen came over and they picked up these 3 kids and they took them outside. And they told them they would not in any way be bullying these 2 girls ever again, or there would be consequences to that. And but it was so neat because, in this curriculum, you talk about positive character and how to help your kids, these standards, a positive character. Then there's a whole section on healthy relationships. How do you look for those dangerous relationships? How do you deal with the bullies? How do you avoid abuse? What's a healthy relationship? And how does that play into self-image that our kids wrestle with? How does it play into suicide ideation, suicide risk? And we haven't even got to sex yet. We're just talking about stuff that every parent wants for every one of their children, every grandparent wants for their children, every pastor and pastoral professional and youth group leader wants for their kids. And only then, on that foundation, do we start talking about optimal, healthy sexual development. And at the same time, at the end, talk about the risks that you can make decisions that are potentially going to harm you forever and how you can avoid that. To me, that just is a progression that makes perfect sense.
Well, we've been accused of being abstinence only or just say no, and abstinence doesn't work. Everybody knows abstinence doesn't work. And I would just say, Dr. Walt, that there's so much more to what we're aspiring to bring to children and how we want to guide and support them into this whole thriving and flourishing wholeness and wellness. You really can't argue with it, although we do. And I've been in local school districts. I've been on state board of education meetings where it can be a fierce debate. And our hope is simply to empower those that have this perspective and this truth that they want to uphold with the confidence that this is the winning option for kids. It's a very positive, hopeful, life-giving message. And the science is there to back you up. It's not just something to be discredited as an ideological, crazy religious person idea or something like that. The science is here, and that's what we're here for.
Well, I heard someone comment recently that the most important elections, public elections in the future, may not be president and Congress and all that, but maybe our local school boards, because our school boards are being faced with decisions, some of which can be devastating for our children and for their development. And another side of what I see Medical Institute of Sexual Health doing isn't just empowering parents and their family, but it's empowering them to be able to speak to their school board, to be able to speak to their state department of health. These are people that we are hiring with our tax dollars. Or if your kids go to a private school or a charter school, to be able to go to the board and say, hey, we have found something here that's going to make a difference for our kids and our families. Let's talk about it. And the power that parents wield is really pretty powerful, isn't it?
Well, I know that moms and dads, your voices really, really matter, and we want to help fuel your voice. In fact, I've got a training coming up next week we sent it out to, I think, 894 school districts in Texas. But that kind of training and equipping is part of what we do here at Medical Institute. And to really empower parents to serve in their role best, and educators and policymakers. We've done some, testifying at the legislature, things like that, where this information comes out across our culture in different ways. And we want to be about partnering with media organizations and how can we help in the healthcare system. We've got a whole kind of range of reaching the culture. And that's what MI's broader vision really in these 29 years into it, as we come up on our 30th years, is really all about reaching the culture for good.
Sure. So we've talked about parents. We've talked about parents speaking at the school board, but there's also going to be people watching this program who are part of a school board or part of a school board or part of an elder board or legislators in various legislative arenas. And Lori, my sense is that these standards would be helpful at all of those levels for, you said, policymakers to understand what the science says and how that matches up with traditional values in a way that we can really help kids with whole health and families to whole health.
I think it's swimming upstream. I think we do a lot of work, as we should do, in terms of catching the fallout, addressing those that have been broken, if you would call it that, or harmed by the sexual revolution. And we want to be doing that. That's kind of the intervention side, as I call it. But then there's also, we've got to be upholding prevention and getting up ahead. And we know if we can reach today's children and their children, we really could begin to reset some things and see a turnaround in our world that is so hurting and harmed by this kind of fallout of the last 50 years. I'm hopeful, Dr. Walt, and would want others to join me in that we can make a difference. Our world is still worth bringing this good health and guidance and support to. And I think we can see a turnaround if we work together.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that, because there are those who will be watching who either have been harmed by the sexual revolution or are being harmed. We'll have viewers who have been sexually abused in the past and maybe never talked about that, carrying the weight, the horror of that. And Medical Institute for Sexual Health has help and hope for them, that our Creator is such that He can recreate in us a new heart and a new mind and reprogram us so that we can, moving on beyond the harm, begin to enjoy the fullness of life. And Lori, I just don't see how people want to oppose that type of message for kids.
Well, I don't either sometimes, Dr. Walt, but we keep after it and we stay fresh with compassionate hearts that see the hurt around us and want to bring the help and hope you've spoken of, that we can do that. There are very practical solutions that we can bring out together around this topic and see a whole host of problems get better. And you've even mentioned, when that connection is in place relationally, it's not just sexual choices that get better, but drug and alcohol choices get better, and academic choices get better, and violence, and you name the health risk, they get better when we are living with that positive character and healthy relationships to support us to a better future. So I think we can do it.
Yeah, it doesn't mean we're not going to have difficulties, but it means we're going to have tools to navigate and bridge through those. And then for those of us who have been hurt in the past, as we receive comfort and tools for developing a whole life, we then actually develop what I call ministry, where we can provide comfort to those coming behind us who are wrestling with what we wrestled with. So our mistakes don't disqualify us from helping others. They become the tools of our experience that we can use to share with those coming behind us, whether they're kids or teens or college age. So we've given people lots of information, Lori. How can they contact Medical Institute for Sexual Health and get some of this information for training and for standards where they live?
Excellent. Well, reach out to us at Medical Institute. That's www.medinstitute.org, medinstitute.org. Those new sex ed standards are easy to find at www.newsexedstandards.org. Happy to help however we can on these topics, and just appreciate you for taking the time to include us in your show, Dr. Walt. There's a lot of good folks out there. We want to find them and empower them and work together with them to help the next generation. They're worth it.
Oh, glad that you're there. Lori, thanks for being with us today. And before we close the show, I want to tell you about 3 books I've written to help parents introduce their children to information that is medically accurate and biblically sound about their young, growing, and changing bodies. The first is called Lint Ball Leo's Not So Stupid Questions About Your Body. It's for boys 8, 9, and 10. The second for boys over age 10 is called The Ultimate Guy's Body Book. Not So Stupid Questions About Your Body. And the third for girls 10 or over is The Ultimate Girl's Body Book. Not So Silly Questions About Your Body. Our kids are going through changes in the body, and this will help you coach them and navigate them. I recommend to parents that if you're going to get these resources, read them first. Be sure they're age appropriate for your child. And many parents have written me saying they're reading a chapter. They'll read it with a child, and they'll read it, and then the child will read it, and then they'll get together and talk. I've had parents write about taking a special weekend away to go through some of these topics with their child using this book, or spread it out over dinners for many months. But it's to help you raise children who are highly healthy physically, emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. Also, a couple of parenting books that you might want to look at. The first one is God's Design for the Highly Healthy Child, and the other, God's Design for the Highly Healthy Teen. And you can find those books at drwalt.com. Just click on the Books tab. Also at drwalt.com, you can sign up for my daily medical news. You can use Apple a Day blog. It's free. Or a twice-a-day biblical devotion. It's called Morning Glory, Evening Grace. You can subscribe to those. There's no charge whatsoever. We don't try to sell you anything. And if this program has raised any thoughts or questions or critique, drop me a line. We'd love to hear from you at Dr. Walt at liftable.tv. That's drwalt at liftable.tv. And until our next visit, dear friends, I pray that you may enjoy good health and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well. I'm Dr. Walt Larimore, and I look forward to seeing you for our next episode of Ask Dr. Walt.